We all like to believe we're good at certain things, maybe even better than most people. But the truth is, we're probably wrong about how good or bad we actually are. In fact, we often overestimate or underestimate our abilities without even realizing it. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger discovered a fascinating effect that now bears their name, the Dunning-Kruger effect. They gave participants tests on humor, logic, and grammar, then asked them to rate how well they thought they performed compared to others. The results were surprising. People who did poorly thought they did much better than they actually had. They lacked the skills to recognize their own mistakes. On the other hand, those who did well often underestimated themselves, assuming others had performed just as well. This showed a strange pattern. The less people knew, the more confident they were. Meanwhile, the more experienced people became, the more they realized how much they still had to learn. If you don't know much about something, you also don't know enough to realize what you don't know. In other words, when you lack skill in an area, you don't have the ability to recognize your mistakes. Dunning himself put it this way: if you're incompetent, you can't know you're incompetent. On the flip side, knowledgeable people see the depth and complexity of a subject. They know how much there is to learn and become more cautious in their judgments. They also assume others must be just as skilled, making them doubt themselves even when they're actually quite competent. This effect shows up in all sorts of places. Take driving, for example. Studies show that 93% of American drivers think they are better than average, which is impossible. In workplaces, employees often overestimate their performance, with as many as 40% believing they are in the top 5% of their company's best workers. Of course, not everyone can be the best. A big part of learning is metacognition, our ability to think about our own thinking. This skill helps us recognize when we've made mistakes and correct them. But people who lack knowledge in a subject also lack the ability to assess their own weaknesses. They don't see where they go wrong, so they assume they must be right. This can be unsettling. You might think you have a good grasp on something when in reality you don't. The most confident voices are not always the most knowledgeable. In fact, because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, the loudest people are often the least qualified. Meanwhile, true experts tend to be more careful, less certain, and more hesitant to make bold claims. Today, it's easier than ever to have an opinion on everything. Social media encourages people to comment on topics they barely understand. Confidence and charisma often get more attention than accuracy and depth. The real experts, the ones who understand the complexities of a topic, tend to speak more cautiously, making them less likely to go viral. This raises an important question. Do we really need more voices, or do we need more careful voices? Should we all be speaking more, or should we be listening more? Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply remain silent and recognize when we don't know enough to contribute. Now that you know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, you might think, well, at least I don't fall for it. But that's the trap. Everyone thinks that. The irony of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that those who are most affected by it don't realize it. If you think you're immune, you might be proving the very point of the effect. Dunning himself put it simply: the first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is that you don't know you're a member. While we can never fully escape this bias, we can become more aware of it. We can choose to speak less and listen more. We can be more careful with our opinions. We can remind ourselves that learning never stops, and that being wrong is part of the process. The truth is, we are all constantly realizing how little we knew before. Life is a cycle of learning, growing, and correcting our misconceptions. The best thing we can do is stay humble, stay curious, and always be open to the idea that we might be wrong.